The project of Walk in My Heels it started a year and a half ago with a question from a student of mine who I teach private lessons in ballroom, Latin dance, and I was teaching her a new technical step, element, and it was more advanced than what she was used to, and of course, she's wearing the high heels and I'm in my, my flats. And she said, well, you should try dancing it, you should try doing it in heels. And somehow in that moment, it clicked for me in that moment. And I took a moment and I paused and I was like, you have a good point.
Brilliant idea.
Brilliant idea. And I was like, and then that's when I became conscious of the work, the rehearsal space, our atmosphere, and I was like, wow, we really, as men, we are training females how to dance in heels, yet we have no understanding of what that feels like. And it kind of then now makes me think of classical ballet and point work. You have men teaching women how to dance in point shoes, but how many of those instructors actually have physically put themselves in that situation to understand it? Yes, we know theoretically how to do it, but we don't actually physically understand it.
I mean, the idea of getting tired and lifting out of your shoes in the third act of Swan, like, we will never know.
Exactly. And you have to experience that to understand it. And so then she made me check myself, and then I was like, for a moment, I was like, I need to learn how to dance in heels. And then that's how it happened. So it took a while because I went on a search. It was very difficult to find heels in my size. I went to so many different stores, expensive to find shoes. They were either way too pricey or costly. It would take over 3 months. Some like, well, we have to ship it to Europe, to the shoemaker. They would have to ship it back. It would take all this process. So I ended up basically starting with walking in heels, then dancing. So I started walking in my first day. Actually, it was a normal day, every day. I was going to Martha Graham rehearsal, and I ordered boots online from a friend of mine who told me about a website, exotichighheels.com, which anyone can go to, and they have sizes up to 15. So they have really big shoes for all sizes. And so I got a pair of 5-inch stiletto boots, and I went outside.
I remember seeing you in those online.
And I loved it. I loved putting it on in the house. It's like, ooh, I like this feeling. This is nice. And I had my sweatpants. I had my Space Jam hoodie, my favorite hoodie, and I was just going a regular day. So I wasn't, dressed up as a drag or campy, as a woman. I was just me, going to rehearsal every day. And the moment I stepped outside, which I wrote about and stuff, I had never felt so self-conscious. And as a dancer, and especially as a Martha Graham dancer, we're very much exposed to the audience a lot because we bear a lot of our physicality. But that made me, I was so self-conscious. It made me so uncomfortable to just be normal and wearing heels. I felt that I was being judged about my masculinity. I could feel an energy that made me feel uncomfortable. And the more I did it, I actually realized that was actually something I was creating myself, because what I wrote in my blog, people were saying, "Woo, work it!" You know, on the street, the lady would tap me on the subway because I went through the subway. I was walking in 15 minutes it takes from the subway to get to West Bath, so I was walking quite a distance. And people would tap me on my shoulder, and say, "You work well, you walk well in those heels." So I was surprised actually about the reaction, that people were excited to just see, you know, a man walking in heels. So I realized that perception I was putting on myself, that pressure to be this, you know, masculine character, was something I was putting on myself. And again, we're lucky that in New York City we have that support.
That freedom too.
That freedom. Because if I were maybe, you know, somewhere in the Midwest, it could be a different reaction.
But you know what else I thought was very, when I saw the rehearsal again, I have to go back to this point. The way you moved, I mean, I could see you were a trained ballroom dancer. And I mentioned to you in that book, Love Letters, is it? The grand piece. I mentioned about your whole department.
Yes, that was Letter to the World.
Yes, okay, thank you.
Letter to the World.
Thank you. And when I saw that, and I saw you in it, and it was very courtly.
Yes.
And your whole department, I said, it was very clear that you had had this other training. Just the way even your back moved, and the way you presented. When I saw you in that rehearsal, my God, the way your legs, the shape of your legs, and the way you extended your body, and just the energy of leading. Because I know it goes back and forth, but for the most part, you do lead.
Yes, for the most part.
And the way you did it, it changed. It wasn't any more masculine or feminine. It was leader-follower, as opposed to that. It didn't become androgynous. It just, the sexuality wasn't important anymore. But the strength that you had was beautiful. I have to say this.
Thank you. I'm happy to hear that as a reaction, because me and my dance partner Kelsey, we actually didn't start rehearsing in heels together until January of this year. So even though I started walking, I was walking in heels, and I was, you know, going into social spaces with heels to discover it for myself. I didn't actually go into technique, ballroom technique, with my partner until January. So it's only been about 4 or 5 months. And it is very difficult, and it takes so much more strength to be the supporter in a platform that's especially narrow. The audience to experience struggle, strength through the body, the visceral experience in the person, and especially the female specifically, which at that time, you know, in the 20s and 30s was a whole new idea, very ahead of her time, and putting that on stage. And so that's what we were hoping to show as well at Ballroom, is like you're saying, not necessarily that it's difficult, but that there's a strength behind it.
That was very clear.
And yeah, and definitely we are in control, no doubt. But as we go along, through, it gets a little hard, well, it gets more difficult. And so there's a vulnerability that I succumb to because it's just difficult. And so because of that vulnerability, my partner supports me through it. So again, I'm not just supporting her the whole time, and she's being supported as the duration of the piece goes. It just congeals to this even energy
where do you see this going? Because you're developing this. Obviously, you've invested 2 years in the process. So you're developing this. Do you have an end goal, or are you still developing it and seeing where it's going to go?
That's a good question. Actually, that's a question me and Kelsey ask a lot, and as well as our musicians too, percussionist Meredith Butterworth and Greg Oside. And we have been working together a lot. We have been finding different ways to see the ballroom technique as a core to our work and change it and extend it in ways it hasn't gone yet. And so we've been playing, for example, with relationship with music, the music to the dance. There are so many other themes too.
All right, I saw, just on that one point, I saw the way that the musician, the percussionist, the vocalist, the percussionist, and the Chubi responded. Mm-hmm. And it was, you think of ballroom and you think these very beautiful gowns, a very traditional way of doing things, and you're kind of taking it out of that box.
Yes, that's exactly what we're trying to do. We want to show an authentic presentation of the work, of the technique of ballroom dance, the work of it. And actually what I should explain is our choreography that we've presented so far, 80% of it is material that we have used in competition.
But it has that look. It does not look like, okay, this is what I love. You can see the traditional elements,
right?
But you're just taking it someplace else.
Yeah, we actually haven't done anything to the movement itself to make it contemporary. Literally, we have performed the same material, that 80% of it, we have added up about 25% of it is contemporary, like modern.
I saw the attitudes.
You saw the attitudes, you saw us going on the floor, the contract.
Yes.
But most of it is actually directly taken from what we would use to compete in the traditional competitive format with us in our traditional roles with the costume and everything.
And I can't be blind, How did I get crazy? Why did I let my hands brush the floor? Now that I've got between my fingers, crawling in mud, and I'm longing for more.
What that shows is that you can just take already what is there raw, and without the layering, the superficial layering, it's powerful on its own. Without the tanning, without
again,
stoning.
Again, what you say, that reminds me more of the ground. Again, stripping it down to its essence.
Stripping, exactly. That's exactly it. And speaking of Martha Graham again, there was one of the pieces, so there's the cha-cha, the rumba, and the bolero. Those are three of the dances of the Latin dance, which there's many. There's samba, paso doble, cha-cha, swing, mambo, salsa. But we decided just to focus on three of them, which was cha-cha, rumba, and bolero. And all of them tell their own story through this very sensual theme. Of course, just because we're just connected as humans, but so we chose those three dances, and we decided one of those dances we would play with the relationship with music that is very contemporary to what is traditionally done in the ballroom expression with music. And we took a quote from Martha Graham. Actually, I was at rehearsal for Night Journey, and I was playing the role of Tiresias, the blind seer, and I was reading up on notes of Martha Graham to inspire me with the work and the character building. And so I was reading on her notes, and in the very first paragraph, Martha Graham wrote that she never believed in the necessity of interpreting music nor story directly to dance, but believed in just as a musician creates a script of music, a dancer creates a script of movement. So that quote was very inspiring to me and Kelsey, and we decided to use that to play around with the rumba. And so what we did is this idea of music and dance being their own entity and their own story, not having to match. And that's a very different idea for ballroom, especially Latin, because you do it to the rhythm. You are dancing to the rhythm, the musicality of the movement, of the music. So it's very, very interconnected. So what we did is we created the movement and we created our own story, and within the centralized theme of gender, sexuality, and stylized presentation, those are three themes. And we created our movement in silence. No music. No music, silence.
Well, then, but you did really good. And if I can interject, because I love when people say things like that, because what you basically did is the movement had its own music.
It had its own music. And we gave the musician the same task, and we said, the percussionist, we asked Meredith to also, with these themes, create your own script. And the vocalist, Greg, with these themes of gender, sexuality, and stylized presentation, create your own story, and he wrote lyrics. And we came together a week and a half before the show, and we came together and we just did it. It was so it was, I mean, Greg wrote a long email, and he said how frustrating it was, and there was so much frustration, and it was so amazing how it really brought this whole new thing, this idea that was frustrating and different, that it created a strong reaction, but through that we were able to drive something new, which you saw in the rumba, and it created a whole nother way of expressing our connection with movement and dance in the rhythmical form of rumba. And so it really enriched the process. So I would say for you, back to your question of where does this go for us, there's so many places, pulling from other ideas and other places and experimenting with the form has made it grow in ways that we never expected. But that was one way we did. We took a marketing quote, and that was very,
So I want to thank you for taking the time out, because you're jockeying between your Graham tour, your rehearsals, and just doing what you have to do in New York City. So again, thank you so much. And I wish you much success with this. I'm excited about being involved in the early part of the process, and I just want to keep it seeing go. I want to see you keep going with this.
Thank you. Definitely will. Thank you.